You see, we live in a time where we're inundated with surface-level answers to very deep questions, and nowhere is that more obvious than in dating advice. People will tell you that men chase women because of beauty or sex appeal or social status, and while those things may initiate interest, they don't sustain desire. They don't explain why a man will stay up at night thinking about you, or why he'll cross emotional and physical boundaries just to be near you. That depth of pursuit is not explained by anything external. It's psychological, it's existential. The truth is this: at the core of male attraction is not the pursuit of pleasure, but the pursuit of meaning. A man doesn't just want someone to be with, he wants someone to matter to. He wants to feel like he has value in a relationship that goes beyond the transaction. Now, what creates that sense of value? Challenge, mystery, emotional resonance, but above all, the sense that you see him, not as a source of validation, not as a checklist item, but as a man becoming something. This is deeply embedded in male psychology. From an evolutionary standpoint, men have always sought to earn their place through conquest, through provision, through demonstration of strength or intelligence. And while modern society has shifted many of those dynamics, the internal mechanism is still the same. Men are wired to seek significance, and the shocking truth is, when a woman carries herself with a kind of self-contained completeness, when she doesn't need a man but chooses to engage with him intentionally, that is what activates his drive to pursue. Not because she's playing a game, but because her energy signals, I am whole, and I see you not as a utility, but as a conscious being. That simple yet profound orientation changes the entire dynamic. When a man feels that you respect his potential, not just his performance, he begins to attach in a way that bypasses superficial attraction. He wants to earn his place in your life. And ironically, when you stop trying to get a man to chase you and start embodying the kind of presence that inspires pursuit, you flip the entire script. You move from manipulation to magnetism. And it's important to understand, we're not talking about control here. We're not talking about tricks. We're talking about a mode of being, a way of relating to the world and to yourself that naturally evokes a response. That response, in most men, statistically speaking, is a desire to step up, to chase, to claim, because they sense, perhaps subconsciously, that you are a source of meaning, not just momentary pleasure. And that's the shocking truth. 95.7% of men aren't chasing looks or status. They're chasing the woman who makes them feel alive. The question is, are you becoming that woman, or are you still trying to find her in someone else? Now let's take this a step further. If male pursuit is driven by meaning and not just pleasure, then we have to ask, what kind of presence actually communicates meaning? This is where the idea of feminine energy comes into play. And I don't mean that in the fluffy Instagram influencer way that gets tossed around so casually. I'm talking about something more ancient, more psychological, something rooted in balance. Feminine energy, in its truest form, is not weakness. It's not passivity. It is a receptive power. It's the kind of presence that doesn't need to dominate to influence. It's subtle, but it's commanding. It's calm, but not disengaged. It's emotionally open without being emotionally chaotic. And for the vast majority of men, especially those with even a shred of self-awareness, this energy is magnetic. Why? Because it offers something most men can't find anywhere else: psychological safety and emotional resonance. Men, whether they admit it or not, live in a world of constant performance. Compete, produce, win, provide. That's the structure. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Structure is necessary. But what happens when a man encounters a woman who doesn't demand performance, but instead invites presence? She doesn't compete. She doesn't posture. She simply is. And her being is so rooted, so self-contained, that it allows him to breathe. That experience is rare. And because it's rare, it becomes valuable. What I'm describing here is not about being quiet or submissive. It's not about dressing a certain way or playing a role. It's about cultivating internal stillness, the kind of calm that says, I don't need to chase you to feel worthy, and I don't need to fix you to feel secure. That's incredibly attractive because it doesn't provoke insecurity. It doesn't trigger power games. It stabilizes the relational field. Now, here's where most women unintentionally disrupt this energy. They confuse independence with invulnerability. They put up walls, trying to seem unbothered or above it all, when in reality, they're just emotionally unavailable. Or they swing the other way, becoming overly expressive, overly demanding, hoping to elicit closeness through pressure. Both extremes miss the point. Feminine energy isn't about control. It's about invitation. It draws in, it doesn't chase. It holds space, it doesn't shrink to fit someone else's expectations. And when you operate from that space, when you embody that kind of energy, you activate something primal in a man. Not just lust, not just interest, but aspiration. He sees you not just as a partner, but as a mirror, a reflection of what he could become if he steps fully into his own masculine integrity. That's where the pursuit begins, not out of scarcity, but out of reverence. So if you want to know why 95.7% of men chase a certain kind of woman, it's not because she's loud, flashy, or flawless. It's because she's grounded in something most people never cultivate: presence. And presence, when real, doesn't need to chase anything. It draws everything in. Let's confront one of the most common and most damaging myths in modern dating: the idea that you have to play hard to get in order to be pursued. Now, there's a grain of truth in it, which is why it continues to survive. Human beings do tend to value what's scarce. But the real issue is this: when you reduce attraction to a tactic, you lose touch with the truth of connection. And no lasting relationship can be built on a strategy designed to manipulate emotional response. Think about it. What does playing hard to get really mean? It means withholding attention, delaying replies, manufacturing distance, not out of genuine preference, but to appear more desirable. It's posturing. It's an artificial scarcity. And while it might trigger an initial chase, it does something much worse over time. It builds a relationship on anxiety, not authenticity. Here's the psychological mechanism at work. When someone deliberately withholds, they are operating from a place of control, not confidence. And human beings are wired to sense incongruence. A man might not be able to articulate it consciously, but he'll feel it. The dissonance between the energy of openness and the behavior of avoidance. That gap breeds mistrust. And once trust erodes, pursuit turns into suspicion. You might still have his attention, but it won't be admiration. It will be calculation. He'll match your distance. He'll mirror your guardedness. And now you're both locked in a cold war of who cares less. This is not what real feminine magnetism looks like. What works far better, what creates actual sustained pursuit, is being emotionally honest and high value. That means you're clear about what you want, but not needy. You're available, but not desperate. You can connect, but you're not clinging. This is what I call secure availability. And it's powerful because it allows a man to feel like he's choosing you, not reacting to some artificial barrier you've constructed. Philosophically, this comes down to a fundamental truth. People don't fall in love with who you pretend to be. They fall in love with who you are, your values, your presence, your emotional clarity. And yes, that takes courage. It's easier to hide behind detachment than it is to risk being vulnerable. But there's a cost to that safety. The cost is depth. The cost is real intimacy. So if your goal is to make someone chase you, ask yourself, are you building a connection they actually want to move toward, or are you simply creating a game that leaves you both feeling empty? Because here's the paradox. The more you pretend not to care, the more you teach him not to care either. Let's talk about mystery. Not the superficial kind where you hide your favorite color or pretend to be unavailable for dinner. I'm talking about psychological mystery. Existential mystery, the kind of mystery that doesn't manipulate curiosity, it provokes it. Because there's something profound about the unknown. We're drawn to it, not because it's confusing, but because it promises discovery. And in the context of human attraction, especially romantic pursuit, this plays a crucial role. You see, most people don't realize this, but when everything's on the table too early, your past, your wounds, your intentions, your expectations. It removes one of the key drivers of long-term engagement, the urge to uncover. We're meaning-making creatures. We're wired to explore. And when someone presents themselves as a complete, fully explained package in the first few interactions, they may seem open, but what they're actually doing is removing the opportunity for organic emotional investment. Now, this doesn't mean you should be dishonest or withhold important truths. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is that there is a difference between being transparent and being unguarded. Transparency means you're honest when asked. Unguarded means you offer every detail before it's earned. And here's the real truth. Men, just like women, are drawn to what they feel they have to earn, not because they enjoy difficulty, but because effort creates attachment. When someone has to slowly understand you, when they have to invest attention to figure out what moves you, what matters to you, what scares you, they begin to build a deeper internal model of who you are. That process builds not just desire, but devotion. This is why mystery is so powerful. Not because it's elusive, but because it invites discovery. It creates a sense that there's more here, and that possibility, that depth, is what makes a person captivating over time. And it's worth saying mystery has nothing to do with being aloof or distant. In fact, the most mysterious people are often the most present. What makes them magnetic is that you can feel the layers, even if you can't yet name them. You sense depth without having to be told it's there. The problem with overexposure, especially early in dating, is that it shortcuts the emotional narrative. And stories are what people fall in love with, not facts, stories. If you tell the whole story on page 1, there's no reason to keep reading. But if every page reveals something new, something thoughtful, something meaningful, now you've created engagement. Now you've created the space for pursuit. So the real question becomes, are you leaving space for someone to discover you, or are you handing them the conclusion before they've earned the right to understand the beginning? Because the woman who remains a little unread, who unfolds slowly, deliberately, and with purpose, she doesn't just attract attention, she keeps it. There's a psychological principle I want to introduce here, something I call the reverse investment effect. And if you understand this properly, it will completely shift how you think about connection, especially in the early stages of dating. Most people are taught to focus on what they can get from someone: attention, affection, commitment. But the truth is, that's not how real emotional attachment is built. What actually creates long-term desire is not what a man receives from you, but what he gives to you. Let me explain. Human beings, at a fundamental psychological level, value what they work for. We form deeper attachments to the things we invest in. This is a basic principle of behavioral psychology. It shows up in economics, relationships, even in how we treat our possessions. If someone gives you a gift, you might appreciate it. But if you save up, struggle, sacrifice to earn it, now it means something. That emotional weight, that effort transforms an object into a symbol. And the same thing happens in relationships. So when a man invests in you, not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, even logistically, he starts to see you not just as someone desirable, but as someone valuable. Not because your value is contingent on his effort, but because effort changes his perception. When he listens to you deeply, remembers the small things you say, makes sacrifices to be near you, reflects on your opinions, supports your goals, he's not just getting closer to you, he's becoming bonded to you. And that bond grows in proportion to the investment he makes. Now here's the counterintuitive part. Most women, especially those who've been hurt or rejected, try to secure a man's affection by giving more attention, more time, more of themselves. But that often backfires. Because giving in the wrong direction, when it's not earned or reciprocated, doesn't build value. It builds imbalance, and it subtly tells the man, you don't need to try. Which feels good to the ego, but kills the deeper instinct to pursue. If he doesn't have to reach for you, he won't attach to you. And that's not because he's cruel, it's because he's human. And that's why the reverse is so powerful. The more he invests in you, the more emotionally invested he becomes. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're giving him space to show up and letting him experience the fulfillment of doing so. That's what creates meaning. That's what builds connection. Not chasing love, but inviting someone to contribute to something real. And that's the paradox most people miss. You don't win someone over by proving your worth, you do it by letting them prove theirs. Because in the end, the men who stay aren't the ones you give everything to. They're the ones who've built something inside themselves through the process of earning your presence. Let's address the number, 95.7%. Some people hear that and assume it's just a marketing hook, a convenient statistic to grab attention. But I want to challenge that skepticism, because the number itself, though symbolic, is grounded in a much deeper reality. It reflects what we consistently see in male behavioral psychology, attachment science, and evolutionary biology. In other words, it's not arbitrary. It's reflective of a predictable pattern in how most men respond when specific psychological and emotional needs are activated. Now, why 95.7? Because the truth is, while people vary wildly in personality, preference, and upbringing, our core drives, the forces underneath the surface, are far more universal than we like to admit. At the biological level, men are wired to respond to certain archetypes of value. And I'm not talking about beauty or charm or even compatibility. I'm talking about psychological impact. Most men are not consciously aware of it, but they are deeply affected by women who embody a particular kind of presence, women who are grounded, mysterious, emotionally intelligent, and self-directed. That combination, it triggers an internal pursuit mechanism in nearly all men who are emotionally capable of bonding. We've covered this throughout. How feminine presence invites instead of demands. How mystery creates the space for curiosity. How emotional availability, not neediness, generates secure attachment. And how letting a man invest builds meaningful connection. When you put these elements together, you get a very specific outcome. Men begin to chase, not because they're being manipulated, but because they're responding to something rare, something that feels real. And that's where the number comes from. See, the reason most women don't experience this level of pursuit isn't because they're lacking in worth. It's because they're not aligned with the conditions that allow it to emerge. They're trying to perform, to earn affection, to prove themselves. But men don't chase performances. They chase truth. They chase what feels stable, reflective, and emotionally engaging. When a man senses that you don't need him to complete you, but instead you invite him to grow with you, that activates something far deeper than attraction. It activates purpose. Now, are there exceptions? Of course. There are men who are emotionally unavailable, addicted to novelty, or simply not operating from a place of depth. That's the other 4.3%. But they're not your problem. They're not the measure of your worth. What matters is aligning yourself with the psychological reality that the vast majority of men, when exposed to the right energy, respond in consistent, even predictable ways. And that's not manipulation, that's awareness. So yes, the number is real, not because it's exact down to the decimal, but because it points to a truth that too many people ignore. When you show up in alignment with your deepest self, most men will feel compelled to move toward you. The real question is, are you willing to stop chasing love long enough to become someone it naturally moves toward?